sickie. For working Australians, it's a rite of passage, one that the late, great Bob Hawke, a legendary Australian Prime Minister, defended vociferously in 1983. For all other listeners from various countries, we all have or we know someone who's taken sick leave when they may not have been entirely sick. However, the one rule of chucking a sickie, especially if you're famous, is to stay away from any kind of events, especially ones where the media might be present. Looks like Ishan Kishan forgot about this rule. After requesting time off at the start of the South Africa series for mental health reasons, he's been spotting with that epitome of fitness, Mr. Hardik Pandya and his brother Kunal Pandya, practicing for the IPL. His employers asked him to report to his state team for domestic games as per his contract, but Ishan's told the BCCI to shove it. To discuss these things and all other things cricket, we've got Ritvik, Mannan, and Pradyut. Ritvik, let's start with you. What do you think of Ishan's petulance?
Well, honest confessions before I start. While Ishan Kishan hails from my hometown and I really wish him well, I'm not a huge fan of the guy. I think he still has a long way to go. I strongly believe that Test cricket is the best format of cricket, and definitely I prefer it over T20 and the IPL. That said, I absolutely don't see any problem in Ishan Kishan not playing Ranji. He probably has realized that Test cricket is not a format that he's really suited for, not a format that he really enjoys, and he wants to make a mark in the shortest format, T20 internationals or the IPL. And probably for that reason, he decided to skip the Ranji, skip the longest format. Wants to practice ahead for the next IPL season, where he's probably one of the most expensive players, and he did not really leave a mark for Mumbai Indians in the last season. So I think the guy wants to spend some time practicing and doing it well there. I don't really relate with the obsession that a lot of older or ex-cricketers are showing for Ranji, the sudden love for Ranji, and saying that if you're not playing Ranji, then you don't deserve to be in the Indian team. I think cricket has evolved into different formats. Cricket is much more than the normal progression that used to happen before, from Ranji to Test cricket and then subsequently to the other formats. So I'm in support of Ishan Kishan here.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. Complete agreement, Ritvik. Multifaceted sport now. 2020, 50 overs, test matches. You might have the 10 over thingy coming up as well. Nothing wrong with these cricketers, the Pandya brothers, Ishan Kishan, and some other specialist cricketers who have this very unique skills. I mean, think of the West Indies. They've done that for several years now. And think of Australia, who struggled to do that. The Big Bash struggled to take off initially. Australia struggled to make any impact in the T20 format before they finally kind of cracked the code. So completely on board. I think Ishan has disciplinary issues, let's face it, but I think he's also kind of drawn the line with BCCI, asking BCCI to stuff up. Always feels good when BCCI is asked to stuff up, which is kind of an ironically. They run cricket in India, which is so dear and near to all of us. But a young cricketer telling them to stay in their lanes, not tell him. The challenge is, I think eventually he will have to bend over and fall in line. But I think he's setting an interesting precedent here, where Indian cricketers are going to be saying, we want to choose formats and we don't want to play formats that don't matter to us. The Ranji format over 3-4 days in scorching heat in the months of in the summer months in India. They're not going to play test cricket for India. Why play that format? And as one of my other friends who works in this field with the esteemed broadcaster once said, we need to pick players for the roles that they're going to play in the team. We have to start looking above individual players and think about how they all are going to come together with complementary skill sets. I, for one, don't even think Ishan has shorter format skill sets, but that's a different matter. In case he does have them, he'll have to show it in the right format.
Look, I think for me, it's a bit more than just that as well. I reckon there's a bit of an employer-employee thing as well, right? You cannot take sick leave from your job and then do parts of your job while you're on sick leave. Your employer wouldn't stand for it. I remember England's faced this problem with Jofra Archer, and I know he worships the fitness that is Hardik Pandya. I mean, he's in the same mold as Hardik Pandya in terms of fitness. When he played a club game for the West Indies, even though he was recovering from his injuries. So as it stands, to be fair, as it stands, Ishan Kishan's, slipping down the list of reserve keepers, right? Rishabh Pant's going to be coming back to the IPL in a couple of months, and then I'm sure he's going to be the first choice keeper across all three formats of the game, which means that he should take every chance he gets to don the gloves, or he should take time to recover, right? And Pradyut, Ritvik, you're right. He doesn't have to play whatever the formats is, all three formats. If he doesn't want to play, he can just choose to play white ball. But that's more of the contractual nature of cricket, and being a state contracted player. And you can say, look, I want to choose a different contract, right? I don't think the BCCI is matured enough to that stage, which means you don't have a choice. If you want to get salary from the BCCI, which is what the effective contractual nature is, you are going to have to take part in whatever the BCCI tells you to do. And if you don't like it, well, then you can choose a different employer. You can ply your trade like Unmukh Chand has done in the US. But on that note, perhaps do you reckon in recent times the BCCI selection for red ball cricket has been through white ball, most notably IPL? We saw this with a famous cricketer and now a member of parliament, Ashok Dinda, and we all know how that kind of went. But Pradyut, what do you reckon? And then Ritvik.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, BCCI's selection policies, as always, has been very, very inconsistent. It's not been wrong or right, because it's been both at different times. So you kind of sometimes think, oh, that's a pretty good job, and seems like they have a mature head on their shoulders, and then they go ahead and do something absolutely silly and idiotic. And bear in mind, I don't feel that those are marginal decisions. Like at the end of the day, you have two players, and then you have to be like, this could do well and that could do well, and let's do a little bit of A/B testing, as you do in the software world, and see which one sticks. This seems like one of those howlers that they every now and then do, where they pick a different format and they pick a different player for the format. They pick somebody who does a different role in that format and ask that person to do a different role in the same format. So it's kind of baffling, to be honest. Wouldn't be surprised if this will continue, because this has never gone away. I think Saurav Ganguly, during his reign, kind of kept a lid on it for the longest amount of time in the most successful fashion. So you do need a very opinionated and successful captain to be able to keep the selectors of BCCI at bay.
So a lot has been said, but firstly, let me talk about Ashok Dinda, because PK mentioned it. So I don't think Dinda was an IPL selection. Dinda had over 400 wickets in Ranji at a bowling average of 27 or 28. So he clearly blossomed in the domestic longest format, and then played a few matches for India. Didn't turn out well, but that's how it was. And talking about test selections being made through IPL or T20, I think very specifically it happened in the case of Surya Kumar Yadav, and that was after Pant got injured, and the management probably wanted something swashbuckling at number 6 or 7, and they thought that, okay, Sky has been doing well in the shorter format, give him a chance. But I don't think he played a lot. And while we happily say that BCCI has erratic selection policies, let's not forget that even the captain and coach have a significant say in selection. So there are sane minds like Dravid, Rohit, and I would have loved to say Kohli, but I don't think Kohli was the sanest chap when it came to team selection. So with people like Dravid and probably even Rohit at helm, I don't think it's really that erratic. And PK said that if you're on sick leave and your employer finds you doing something else, working for somebody else, then it's an issue. But who really is the employer here? Ishan Kishan is also employed by the Mumbai Indians, and the IPL franchisees have been a creation of BCCI. So I really think that BCCI has become insecure of late. They are possibly envisaging a scenario where IPL franchisees will groom their own players who are 15-year-olds, find them in schools and colleges, start grooming them, tell them that forget Ranji, you keep practicing and training with us for the T20 format, and in the next 3 or 4 years, you will play for our franchisee. So they are just bypassing the whole Ranji or Saeed Mushtaq Ali or the Challenger Trophy, whatever formats that they have, and saying that, okay, you don't play for these tournaments, you practice with us, you play for Mumbai Indians or Delhi Capitals for 3 or 4 years, you do well, and you never know, you may end up playing for India after that. So it's an alternate career path that BCCI has unconsciously created for these players, and now suddenly they are becoming insecure. BCCI is becoming insecure, and I think it's not so much on Ishan Kishan. they really want to take control back from the franchisees, and that's why they are acting the way they are.
Fair point. And I'm going to segue to Pradyut because, well, let's face it, I love to interrupt his dal chawal as he's digging into dal chawal as a man who's never seen food for the past 2.5 weeks. But I want to look at what Pradyut said makes sense. You know, the BCCI does stuff because it suits them, because they like it. And I reckon even with Ranji Trophy, the BCCI is now supporting Ranji Trophy because it suits them. Because the BCCI really started caring about the Ranji Trophy when they saw how, you know, the BCCI in the Indian cricket team used to come here. They used to lose to state teams in Australia before then losing onto the Australian team and then go back 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, including all these games. And we used to just shit ourselves, right? But I reckon when the BCCI saw how the Australian team handles their domestic structure, the BCCI said, all right, we're going to start caring about it, especially now that Virat Kohli and all these guys started putting the primacy of Test cricket at the top, and then they really started to look at Ranji. Which means, you know, there's a greater competition for players in the 11, whether it's India 11 or the India A team. And also Kuch Behar, right? An under-19 trophy that I think Rahul Dravid's son is now playing in. So, you know, Pradyut, given you also follow Australian domestic cricket and you're digging into your dal chawal, what do you reckon? Does anyone care about Ranji anymore?
I think these things are either going to die or thrive together. So if Test cricket dies, Ranji trophies and these formats will die. And if Test cricket survives, we'll find creative, inventive ways to make these formats survive as well, because they're a feeder into the national Test cricket team, right? Now, those rules of the game are not going to change. You'll have to play 5 days. You'll have to survive tough conditions, blah, blah, blah. So that's that. Now, obviously, Australia and their structures are probably the gold standard in most sporting events, not just in cricket. You look at the swimming structures, you look at other players in this small country and the way they punch above their weight for the population they have in global sports events. So there are things that you can learn from them regardless. BCCI would do well to keep politics out of the sport. And so far, I mean, Indian cricket team, what they've achieved, they've succeeded in spite of BCCI and not because of BCCI. So it would be good to change that for a bit and rejuvenate these local domestic structures, your Ranjis and your Syed Mushtaqs, give young players enough financial motivation and a consistency in selection for the national team. And obviously, there are other global factors at play through which they have to keep Test cricket alive to make sure that upstream flow has any merit. Otherwise, I mean, why even have these regional formats or domestic formats?
Fair point. Ritvik, you get the last word.
While Test cricket has definitely been shrinking, I don't think it's going to die anytime soon. It will continue to shrink. It will probably be a format that is restricted to the love of common fans like us. But the biggest testament to this came on the cricket field yesterday, when Dinesh Karthik said, while he was giving the cap out to Dhruv Jurel, that you may play a lot of cricket, you may play multiple formats, but anybody who has played cricket for India would say that the feeling that you get after playing in whites and even winning a test match is the greatest of them all. And also the tears in the eyes of Naushad Khan, as long as there are fathers who take the maximum pride when their children or when their sons or daughters play for the Indian national team in whites, I think Test cricket will continue to have its own sweet spot in the world of cricket.
Harry, you're sinking that dal chawal in, mate. What do you have to say?
And that actually reminds me of the fact I was kind of trying to think of why is there so much romance around the format of Test cricket, right? It's just another format. You have 3 more formats or 2 more formats. And I think the reason for that is that obviously we have grown up on a healthy dose of Test cricket and our heroes championing and extolling the format. What will probably be the death knell for Test cricket is that when you have a once-in-a-generation player like a Virat Kohli or a Sachin Tendulkar, it's unthinkable to say this, but they'll kind of go on record and say, it's okay for young players to choose the format that they want. if they are even a little bit ambiguous about their love for Test cricket, regardless of what they feel inside. When I say little bit ambiguous from a perception perspective, like you don't know what Virat actually feels about Test cricket. We don't know him. So you just like to believe that he cares about it because he says it out loud. So as long as he's giving that optics out, you're safe and sound. So you have to think the next superstar. Is Shubman Gill your next superstar? If Shubman Gill tells you tomorrow, it's just too hard, and I'm just gonna play the smaller format. And it's okay, young players should be allowed to choose, like you see in any other facet of life, right? People are today being asked to choose their gender. And then you're like, oh, you don't know how that conversation is going to go. So if
Gender or even
Shubman Gill says,
born as a human, but I feel I'm a cat.
So I'm a tree, I'm Groot, or whatever. So Shubman Gill, if he's your next superstar and he comes and says, or Yashasvi Jaiswal or Ruturaj Gaikwad or somebody, or Hardik Pandya is your next superstar.
Go ahead, Pradyut. I'll talk to you after this. But
yeah. So that's when Test cricket starts getting in trouble, because right now you see the cricketers who are celebrated globally, they all virtue signal, and I hate this activity, but they all virtue signal that Test cricket is their first true love when it comes to cricket. And if that never changes, I think we'll always have this conversation of Test cricket is shrinking, but it'll always be there.
Couple of things. Go ahead.
I have a small little thing to say. I'll flip what Parry said a little bit and say that only those players went on to become great who had unequivocal love for all the three formats and especially Test cricket. Rohit Sharma is also being spoken in the same is also being treated in the same category right now, but it has happened after the last few years. He has been pretty prolific in the Test arena, so probably the love for Test cricket is synonymous with greatness.
Fair point. And I just like to say that, Pradyut, whenever he gets some dal chawal into his body, he turns into an intellectual juggernaut rather than the simple simpleton he is. And on that note, I reckon it's time to call it a day. England and India have just called stumps. It is 200. England is 207 for 2 with Ben Duckett 133 runs off 118 balls with 21 fours and 2 sixes. Joe Root is 9 off 13. So England trailed by 238 runs, which means India's going to have to bat again in the second innings. Who would have thought? This is what, day 2? Baseball. But anyway, over the weekend, if you're watching, playing, talking about cricket, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. Once again, please do subscribe to our show, The Common Fan Podcast, so you can be given updates to the latest shows. Thank you. Have a good night. And Pradyut, doing a great job, son, with the dal chawal.
Shabak khair.
Bye.